Kia ora tātou. I'll open the meeting with a karakia. Tuia ki runga, tuia ki raro, tuia ki waho, tuia ki woto, tuia ki te here tangata, ka rongo te ko, ka rongo te ao, haune e, hui e, taki e. Welcome to this meeting of the Public and Active Transport Committee. I'll just introduce, actually we have a new ODT reporter, Matthew Littlewood. Thank you, Matthew, for your interest. Good to see you here. As you'll have seen, and we've got Pim Bowen and Lorraine and Chen online, which is great to see you there, keeping the carbon footprint down. I'd like to thank the transport team led by Pim and ably assisted by Lorraine and Julian Phillips for their work here.
Doug's here.
Doug's there. Hello, Doug. Welcome to you too. And thank you for your work in this space as well. I'd like to acknowledge my co-chair, Andrew Noon, and chair of the Regional Transport Committee, Councillor Kate, for their work in this space and the support of the people around the table in helping us drive this work. I think we're making progress, and the work with TAs has moved to a more collegial space. Our patronage numbers are up in both areas. We're looking at regional transport business cases are marching on, so there's actually a lot of work to do and a lot of investment to be made, but the reports being presented today show some really good green shoots for public and active transport and a mode shift that is enabled through that. The working environment remains difficult with no GPS underpinning the regional work and real fiscal constraints in all of our budgets. So all that's going on. So we will start with apologies. We don't have any at the moment. I don't think, but, maybe lateness for Tim. There's Julian, that's good to see. So shall I have somebody move? That? Thank you. Seconder for apologies, lateness. Alan, Councillor Somerville. Public forum, there are no requests to speak. Confirmation of the agenda. I think we'll just run it as it is. Do I need to move that? No, it's all good. Declaration of interests. Council declarations are published on the RIC website. If anyone's got any changes that need to be added, now's the time to say. No, nothing there. Okay, so we'll move to the minutes of the 10 May meeting. Hopefully people have had a look at that. Andrew will move. And have I got a seconder? Alan Somerville will second. Thank you very much. Actions from resolutions of the committee. What's that?
Aye.
Okay. And mover is Kate Wilson.
No. I was doing the previous one.
Oh, you're doing that. I had to put that motion up. Thank you very much. Okay. I thought you were just going to remind me that it's
okay. We have got that motion.
All those in favour, please.
Aye.
Thank you. And that's the confirmation of the minutes and in the actions register. What was on that? Any discussion on that?
So just a point on action number 1. which was on the City and Co-Chairs to look at strategic KPIs for public transport as part of the annual plan process. We've passed that point in time now to set those KPIs within the annual plan. So that one can be closed. And obviously there's an opportunity through the long-term plan to have a close look at what KPIs we want to set over that upcoming 3-year period. As I understand, the KPIs for the 3rd year of this annual plan cycle are as they were for years 1 and 2. So we didn't make substantial change through an annual plan process, but we do have that opportunity through the long-term plan to look at how we want to measure our performance in the public transport space.
Well, thank you for that. And I appreciate that was a difficult bit of work, but it doesn't preclude us getting reports that may address other information or monitoring that may assist us planning, I presume. And I think that's where we were just trying to do, because, yeah, it is important we start getting some of that in place as soon as possible. Thank you.
Anybody else on that subject? No. Okay. How about the regional public active transport connectivity strategy? Well, it's about to come up right now in today's meeting. So we'll discuss that at that time. Next. So we'll kick off into our first matter for consideration, public and active transport operating environment.
We just need to pass those actions and
Oh, do we?
resolutions out.
Okay. It says here that we don't need to.
Sorry, apologies, it's
That's
just
all
gone
right.
away.
Yeah, no, we'll just update those. So the first one will be closed off and the second one will be after today.
It's after, yeah, okay,
Subject to
that's
that discussion.
all good. Thank you very much. So a public and active transport operating environment, it's quite an interesting one, but we'll hand that over to Pamela. Do you want to speak to that, introduce that paper?
Sorry. Hi, Alexa. Look, I'm very happy for Lorraine to speak to this. She wrote the paper, and but I'd also just like to acknowledge the comments you made as chair just now in terms of the progress we've made with the transport team. And like you, I'm really thrilled with the work that Lorraine and the team are doing and the place we've got to in terms of our provision of services both in Dunedin and in Queenstown, which, as you all know, have been very challenged over the last 12 months. So it's great that we're one, that we now have sufficient drivers in both regions, that we're not having very many missed trips at all, and secondly, that we're seeing such a huge bounce back in patronage. Really wonderful. So thank you very much for acknowledging that, Alexa, but let me pass on to Lorraine in terms of the overall operating environment in terms of this report.
Thanks, Lorraine. Paint us the bigger picture, please.
Thank you. Can I just check that everyone can hear me clearly? Great. Thank you. Through you, Chair, as you mentioned, we're operating without the GPS, but we have heard murmurings that we still might get a GPS before the election, and maybe even before the end of the month. Otherwise, I'll largely take the paper as read. Happy to answer any other questions, and just noting that the points of interest are the ongoing monitoring of our patronage and card use since the end of the 50% subsidy on public transport. And in relation to the Regional Transport Committee update, it doesn't include the meeting that we had, for obvious reasons. We had the last meeting on Friday, 4th of August, so just after the agenda had closed. Other than that, I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions from around the table? Lorraine or Kim? Alan?
Yes, thanks.
Somerville?
Look, I was going to ask about the relationship between the regional land transport plan and the long-term plan. And I see on further reading that sort of answered to some extent in 8.6, but a verbal explanation might be very good for my understanding.
Can I pass that to you, Lorraine?
Yes, certainly.
I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, so we prepare obviously the regional land transport plan on the same timeframe as the LTP, and the LTP, we can't put activities into the regional land transport plan for which we don't take, the approved organisation doesn't take financial responsibility for. So although we put together the RLTP to attract funding from the National Land Transport Fund at that 51% FAR rate, we have to demonstrate that we can collect the 49% local share through our LTP, through that mix of targeted or general rate.
Does that answer that for you, Alan?
Yes, I think, yeah, that and the reading and the explanations in 8.6 is helpful. Thanks, Lorraine.
Maybe I could add a little bit too. Look, at the end of the day, Alan, clearly because public transport subsidised so heavily through Waka Kotahi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So because it's subsidised so significantly through Waka Kotahi, we do need to make sure that both sides have got the funding available. And so almost by definition, we do have to coordinate what goes into the RLTP, as Lorraine just explained, and what goes into our own long-term plan. And so if we've got aspirations in terms of increasing our funding, then clearly we need to make sure that they're in the RLTP to ensure that Waka Kotahi is aware of those and prepared to invest in them as well. So it is very much coordinating those two streams of work to make sure that we're on the same page.
That also includes working with the territorial authorities too, to make sure the funding's in their long-term plans. So there's a partnership between all three, isn't it?
Exactly. So again, as Lorraine just explained, the regional land transport plan does include the investments from our partner TAs, and most of that's around capital investment and, whether it's bus stops or bus lanes or bus hubs or whatever, we need to ensure that that capital works program is able to be done to support the work that we'll ultimately do in terms of servicing the public passenger transport aspect.
Thank you. Councillor Callagher and then Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, hi, thanks. So my question's around large capital roading infrastructure projects when you've got substantial development proposed. And I'm thinking Queenstown and I'm thinking Lake Hayes, and the discussions I have there with other people in the community who suffer the gridlock traffic every day. They see the clear messages that the solution is public transport or walking, cycling, whatever. And then they see substantial projects proposed for more housing, more development, which will just create greater pressure on roads. And to me, the baseline of what's needed with those roads seems to be lacking, yet the developments are moving quickly. And so how does that fit with us when we're within our transport planning, our long-term planning? And, if the blatant obvious solution was a baseline would be a new bridge that you could 4-lane from Lake Hayes to the BP roundabout, how would that then be factored, because they take a long time to eventuate?
Yeah, so again, I'll probably get Lorraine to add to this because she's been heavily involved in helping prioritise those capital works projects so that they ultimately do support better movement on those roads where we've got significant congestion at the moment. And we know that as we get more development, that will only add to the pressure on the current infrastructure. So you're quite right, Gary, they are challenges. And some of those priorities, again, you might think the solution's more buses, but actually getting more buses on the road won't be helpful if they're gridlocked as well. So we need to find a way of getting buses moving in bus lanes or through some sort of a process. The BP roundabout, for instance, is one significant project that until we get that capital work done, investing more in our number of buses or public transport becomes almost, just won't get the results that we might have otherwise hoped for. But Lorraine, why don't you touch on the big capital projects, because we're working closely with our TA and Waka Kotahi colleagues to try and get those priorities and those projects done in the next few years.
Yes, absolutely. That's with the Queenstown work is being progressed under the Wakatipu Way to Go banner, and so that involves us working closely with Waka Kotahi on the delivery side, as opposed to when we usually work with them on the funding side and the investment proposals. They're still involved, but we're actually coordinating what we will deliver against their deliveries. The deliveries, and I guess it's a perfect example of the challenges that we have in preparing and putting together the RLTP and coordinating that with our LT investment. In Queenstown, the major capital infrastructure works are actually being delivered through the NZ Up, the New Zealand Upgrade Program, which again is sort of outside the NLTF, but the same principle applies. We have to coordinate our timing of our investment and also the level of our investment for the PT services based on the infrastructure that is provided. In Queenstown, for instance, and this happens, this is just the way these things happen, but the program business case that we're doing for public transport, based on the earlier program business case, assumed some infrastructure such as the Frankton Roundabout and Frankton Bus Hub would have been delivered by now, but obviously timeframes always change, but that means that we also have to keep flexible and keep engaged as to when we bring forward our proposals for our services investment on that network and what that network looks like at the time.
Isn't this, Lorraine, a lot to do with things like the future development strategies and land use and spatial planning as well?
Oh yeah, yes, it does, and that is a bit of a, that's a changing landscape as well at the same time, because obviously we're trying to deliver the transport services and the network at the time to support growth, but in respect of the future development strategies, we're still working to land the staging and timing of growth and in the form of growth as well, although in Queenstown case the locations are quite clear.
And it's been very clearly outlined to us that there is no new bridge coming across the Shotover, and even if there is nowhere for the cars to go when they get to the other side. There's some pretty intransigent issues there to be going through. Would that be correct?
There's challenging issues to be faced.
Okay, we'll call them that. Okay.
Chair, sorry, can I just follow that question though with another one, that if that is the case, there will be solutions to those. Like, the message to me has been very clear, there's no bridge on the horizon, but the issue remains and it's not going to go away, and it is only going to get worse. And one day we will have gridlock traffic there and an ambulance unable to get through, and that is going to only get worse. So what we need to be doing is starting to advocate far stronger for just that baseline upgrade if it is needed and justified, because I think it is at the moment. But it doesn't seem to be on the horizon for QLDC or Waka Kotahi.
So again, just supporting Lorraine, both Waka Kotahi and QLDC are challenged in their capital works programs at the moment. There's no question about that. They've got limited funding. That's why we're behind in some of those projects, as Lorraine just explained. And the BP roundabout and the bus hub are the first priority, but we're still looking 3 years away. And in the meantime, yes, more traffic is growing and more development is happening. And, ultimately we have to try and service some of the bus stops that have been built in those developments. But the real investment in terms of additional passenger transport services need that infrastructure to occur, potentially bus lanes as well, to support particularly the Ladies Mile, as you've just discussed, Gary. Such a challenging space.
Definitely, thank you. It's not a perfect storm. It's going to turn into a perfect hurricane if it isn't addressed soon, and maybe central government needs to step in. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Gary. We'll go to Kate and then to Michael Rawls.
My question was slightly different, but given that there is no GPS at the moment, my understanding is that what will be presented, we're being encouraged to present a wider range and a greater depth of projects potentially to ensure that things can fit into the GPS when that does bed down. And taking Gary's point, is it that we should be looking for alternative solutions perhaps, or driving, is there room to, congestion charges or something like that, working with TAs in order that we don't, I don't know that you can have a perfect storm. I think it's quite the opposite. And we, for the sake of people who may need health services or other and speed and the efficiency of the whole town, whether we should be working with TA to look at other solutions that may drive change. Is that happening?
So again, Lorraine mentioned the Way to Go program. I'm on the board of Way to Go, so I get those reports from the management level staff, which includes Lorraine. We're discussing all of these issues all of the time. It's not about not being aware of the problem. QLDC is acutely aware, that transport's a really major issue for them. And yes, there are different ways in which we could try and help solve some of those issues. I think in a later paper, I discussed some of the different parameters that ultimately will drive people. I'm sure Michael Laws will have something to say about this, but ultimately drive people out of cars and into buses, which is what we're trying to do.
Well, or just to make a much more efficient transport system. Look, thank you for the report. And the only other question I had, if I may, is understanding how and it's coming out of some email traffic from Elliot, how we're ensuring that the public are aware of some of these changes as they ramp up, especially the new route and the express route in Dunedin. What comms is going with that?
Through you, Chair, we have got all the comms lined up to go, and which will be public notices and social media feeds and website information, and that is just waiting on the report being received at council.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, we have a full comms plan with these changes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Councillor Laws?
Yes, well, my views on cars and buses and things like that, but here's where the rubber hits the road. Waka Kotahi are currently opposing a growth strategy in my neck of the woods at a place called Parkburn, where 500 new houses are expected to be built and a plan change will go through the Central Otago District Council without too many problems. Well, with Waka Kotahi opposing it. For councillors, the reason they're opposing it is because there is no public transport in Cromwell. None. So in other words, because there's no public transport in Cromwell, Waka Kotahi don't want any new subdivisions or developments that are anywhere at any distance from Cromwell for / environmental reasons. In other words, there'll be more emissions as a result of people having to drive from the Parkburn development into Cromwell, which will be their nearest town. Does the Otago Regional Council have a view on that? Because it would seem that Waka Kotahi are seeking to sabotage both economic and residential growth in Central Otago, and I don't want the Otago Regional Council anywhere near that kind of stupidity.
So I'll take that. So we will. I will need to check in with our team who handle any submissions, Michael, and just check whether we have or have not chosen to on that. It's not for us to comment on the reasons why another agency may or may not have submitted or supported on a plan change proposal. But there is something in there in what you said around our role in providing or not public transport services other than in Queenstown and Dunedin, which I know is something through the long-term plan process has come up as an item for discussion. So there's something there for me to get back to you on in terms of any position we may have taken through our submissions process, which is run out of Anita's team. But I don't think it's appropriate for us to pass comment on Waka Kotahi's position and the reason for that.
No, except we might have to make, Richard, a submission on this ourselves. I mean,
That's
the
why
irony of the irony of this is, Richard, that and can I press this with my colleagues as well? The irony of this is because we don't have public, and this is the Otago Regional Council doesn't have public transport options outside of Dunedin and Queenstown, we are actually hurting the communities who need to build houses and create job opportunities and meet the labour needs of our region. Now, this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where our public transport deficiencies are meaning that we've got the National Funding Organisation opposing economic growth in Central Otago and in specific in Cromwell. So, you know, we need, I would rather that we address that through our regional land transport plan as well as to what our views are, because without those options, we may, in actual fact, be sabotaging, as I said, the economic growth that is coming to our region in general.
questions.
You got a question there, Michael?
Yeah, where is it in our regional? I mean, I'm just factoring when we do our regional land transport plan, Alexa. I'm just trying to work out where the economic growth of our region comes as well. You know, and I guess what I'm trying to implore is that when our central funding agency, Waka Kotahi, come out with this sort of stupidity, I want to make sure that we're not sitting on the sidelines letting them go because of the implications of their opposition for our region in general.
Thanks. So, Michael, I'll see if anyone can answer that question.
It was certainly a subject in the regional land transport plan.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, Michael, absolutely. There is an opportunity for us to consider our provision of public transport for exactly this issue. I'll have to defer to Lorraine in terms of the function that RLTP plays and whether or not the matter of regional economic development is considered through that process. But and I will come back to you on the question of the submission or not from ORC.
Thank you, Richard.
Lorraine, did you have anything for?
Just to confirm that yes, this is the place to put these transport interventions and investments is into the RLTP. The Balancing Act, which we've been talking about, is the GPS provides the priorities for the government to invest, and the RLTP is the balancing act between what the community wants to invest, between what the government says it will be invest, and obviously it's ideal to get the highest level of alignment for the sharing of costs. But the RLTP is the place where these aspirations and investment signals should be included.
Maybe I could just also add, Richard, my view is we're very open-minded as an organisation in terms of additional public transport provision in smaller towns. Lorraine and I have spoken to Waitaki District Council specifically on this issue in Oamaru. We know they're keen. If Central Otago District Council approached us, we would have similar conversations. We're trying to get on the same page. And my view is that within the next decade, which is the length of our LTP, we should be looking at the opportunities of additional provision in smaller towns, as well as interregional provision potentially for public transport. So these are certainly not off the table from my perspective.
Can I just ask, as just a substance to that, and that is, but we know that Waka Kotahi don't have any money. We know that their priorities are in the North Island. The government and the opposition have both signalled that that's where their primary investment's going to be, so there's unlikely to be more money for public transport options in Otago. What options do we then have, Pim, in trying to make sure that we can provide it when the government have no intention, it would appear, to fund?
Well, I'm not sure that they don't have any intention to fund public transport. The signals have been tier 1 centres, and most of those are in the North Island, you're quite right, for public transport. And Richard and I had that conversation as recently with James Cagle as last week. But there's nothing quite like political pressure. And if community and the regional council together were to indicate that we wanted additional provision. By the way, Waka Kotahi have got no money particularly for infrastructure because that's where most of the demand is at the moment. And they're still very keen on more public transport as a rule, public and active transport as a rule. It's cheaper for them than infrastructure, capital expenditure. So, we're seeing transport building up as a major election issue this year, I suspect. So, yeah, look, my view still is we get alongside the regional council and the TA, and we work up a case together, and we make that case to Waka Kotahi in the strongest way that we can. And to be fair, that's exactly what Lorraine and I are doing, particularly for Queenstown.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Somerville.
Thanks. I see this paper notes some route changes. So I did have a question about route changes and the best way of responding to public requests. Because councillors sometimes receive suggestions for route changes or other matters from constituents, and we pass those on to our transport staff. But I guess I'm asking because I know a number of councillors, at least two, have received feedback from constituents who don't feel they've been listened to after making suggestions. So really my question is, what's the best way of responding to constituents if they have sent those suggestions through?
Lorraine, do you want to?
Do we have a process, Lorraine, that the people's suggestions get considered?
Oh, yes, we do. So we have, we obviously receive all of any requests that we receive, and we also keep all our database. To be fair, it's only really just getting quite useful for us through some changes that we've made recently to better interrogate it. So the first thing we would do if we get an individual request is to look at what other similar requests or comments or information do we have from the public regarding that route or that service or whatever. So then we can get a gauge as to, I guess, is it more than one person or a small group? But regardless, we always consider the specifics of the request. So we look at the implication of the request on what it would be on, primarily on the travel running time of the service. And we need to be really clear that minutes can make a difference. So you go slightly over the headway, obviously the time between two services with your running time, and then you change the dynamics of the operations. And we also have to consider, are there infrastructure changes that would need to support any change to a route? That's the formation of stops or the provision of shelters, and also buses can get round corners and roads and start and stop on some of the hills in Dunedin in particular, because those aren't the costs that we don't, we're not accountable for. So we have to work with the TAs to plan. And we also put them through we have a transport planning tool called Remix, which looks at the impact on the walkability of any change to the population as a whole, like what the walk up is. If it makes sense, we still have to determine that it's cost neutral, which it can be, but not many are. Or we have to determine what the significance of the change is, both in terms of costs and impact on people, in which case we would have to consult. As soon as we have to consult, we have to also evaluate whether we hold out for a contract renewal. So when is that unit coming up for renewal, or will we need funding approval, which is from yourselves, but also from Waka Kotahi, and also to prepare and negotiate a contract variation with an operator. So even when we are responding to people in a positive way, it can take a really long time for this to go through. And in the last few years, it's probably been longer than normal because we haven't had drivers. So that last step of negotiating or arranging the contractors to take it up hasn't been possible because we haven't had drivers available to change if there's been an impact on the vehicles or drivers. And also to remember that if it's approved and we have all of those steps in place, we need to produce a new GTFS, which is feeds into the RTI, the operational data and the timetable. And then, of course, we have to update all the timetables on the route electronically, but also along the route. At the moment, they're all hard copy virtually and communicate, as we talked about, that the changes are happening and when and how.
Thanks, Lorraine.
Yes, I'll just comment. Thanks, Lorraine. That's good to hear. And I mean, it's clearly, and I appreciate it's a complex business changing the route. And so where we are saying no to constituents, that's good that we're able to explain that we have taken that seriously and there is a process behind that. And it's not just a no, but rather we have looked at that seriously. So thank you for that.
Thanks for your detailed answer, Lorraine. That's great. And Kate, you had one last question?
No, I'm happy to move when you're ready.
Thank you. I am ready. So we've been asked to note this report.
I'll move
Moved
it.
Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Weir.
Can I speak to it?
You can speak to it.
Look, it's wonderful reports, all of them today, and I want to overemphasise that. I should, but one thing that's missed out, and I just wanted to say congratulations to the government for, because this is the only time I think I can, is for the completion of the $25 million Beaumont Bridge, which is saving our staff a significant amount of time coming into from Central and ourselves, no doubt. Two councillors today have chosen not to use it this week, but for anyone who's been over it and understanding that there's two-way traffic now, it's a huge improvement. And I think sometimes the planning stages take so long, we forget to stop and celebrate some great investments, and that is one that is a substantial improvement. So I think it's a moment to cherish, really. I would hate to not raise it today to people of Otago.
Thanks, Kate. And we've still got some discussion. Councillor Malcolm.
Yeah, no, I was just going to talk. I'm happy to support the motion, but I just want to particularly note that I've been going to Queenstown for some 40 odd years now, and all the time that I've been going there, there's only ever been one road in there. And so the people up there that have been developing and continue to develop might want to sit back and say, well, actually, we knew that was the only road. Perhaps we should have been charging more development contributions and having a good hard think about it far earlier on. So good luck, Queenstown. Keep your high values going up and keep your rates low, and you'll still have your problem going the way you are. But very good report, and thanks for bringing us up to date.
Thanks, Councillor Malcolm. Councillor Noon.
And the Waitaki's available.
Cheaper houses.
I just want to touch on two issues that was discussed. The first one, when Michael Laws raised the issue about additional services around the region. In our passenger transport plan, we have aspirations. It's in there in the commentary that we would like over time to investigate the possibilities of those additional services. So we've certainly been thinking about it for quite some time. And the other topic I wanted to touch on when Gary mentioned about development, sort of ad hoc to a certain degree where we haven't got the appropriate infrastructure to back up those developments, i.e. roading infrastructure. Kevin's just touched on it as well. But one of the issues up in Queenstown is that the developers, most of them have got very, very deep pockets. The land obviously is very, very expensive, but the sorts of proposals that they're putting on the table are often inadequate in terms of that infrastructure support or whatever, but they end up in the Environment Court, and with those deep pockets, they often get their own way, those developers. So, it's one of the challenges, one of the battles. And when Alexa and I have been up there on those discussions around whether it's the future development strategies or the way to go discussions, it pops up nearly every time where the infrastructure alignment with the development isn't there. Queenstown, unfortunately, are playing catch up, and it's a historic dilemma that will take many, many years to resolve, I would suggest. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Choices aren't there. Councillor Laws.
Yeah, I feel I need to comment, given Councillor Malcolm and Councillor Noon have had a bit of a go at Queenstown. Can I just say that Queenstown is the jewel in the crown of New Zealand's tourism industry. It is a critical in terms of earning foreign exchange revenue for our country. from which all good things like education, health, roading, ironically, flow. And central government has not met its obligations, given the amount of taxation and GST it takes out of that region and that town in particular, to meet the infrastructural needs of a community that's simply meeting demand. The fact of the matter is that Queenstown is an international city or an international town now. So I think it's a bit tough to turn around and blame it for not having the infrastructure that really is the responsibility of central government, given how many of those revenue flows go into the National Consolidated Account. That's true of also Central Otago, Wanaka, Cromwell. Now we're starting to see a similar Alexandra catch up as well. People are coming to Central Otago in vast and increasing numbers, many from an international background. It's where people want to live. So really, as it's always been the nature of infrastructure that you follow the people. And at the moment, if we are thinking that we are somehow going to try and limit the choice of individuals, of companies, of corporations, of the international community, because, you know, we've got one road in and one road out, and that's the end of it. Well, that's not an answer. That's just Luddite type mentality. And we need to be actually progressing these issues on behalf of our community. That's what we're elected to do. So we need to follow the growth, not inhibit nor stop it. I'm just making those points on behalf of our burgeoning Central Otago and Lakes community.
Thanks, Councillor Laws, taken in the discussion and the spirit they intended, I'm sure. Councillor Weir, would you like a right of reply before I put the motion? Councillor Wilson?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
I'll put that motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you, and thank you, team. We'll move on to the Joint Public and Active Transport Committee advisory groups. Now, this report provides a background to those. So these groups are our territorial authority representatives, and they provide the link between the respective TA, QLDC, and DCC, and their transport representatives, which is providing us with much more and direct communication. And this is really quite new, these groups. And I'll hand over to you, Prim. Lorraine.
Michael's mic is on.
Michael, your mic's on. Pam, would you like to take over from here? I think you wrote this.
Thanks, Alexa. Yes, look, I wrote this paper. So firstly, this is really emphasising the additional focus that ORC is putting onto public and active transport. And part of that additional focus was firstly the creation of this subcommittee as a formal committee of council, and it's going very well too, by the way, so that we're really making sure that at a governance level we're fully responsible for public and active transport throughout the region. And alongside that, the responsibility we have to work closely with each of our TAs that make up our region, right across the region, and particularly the two TAs where we currently offer public transport services. So these two advisory groups have been set up, and they're there to help direct and provide direction to this committee. So I just wanted to give a bit of an update to this committee in terms of how those advisory group meetings have gone so far. The first two we held with Dunedin City Council and QLDC occurred while I was overseas and on leave, so I wasn't able to attend them, but my understanding is that they went extremely well, that they're very collegial, that the meetings have been very constructive, and discussions have been very positive. So, and since then, I was able to attend the most recent meeting with Queenstown Lakes District Council. We had a second advisory group meeting more recently, a couple of weeks ago. So, look, just to inform all of council that this new governance structure for public and active transport, where we work more closely with our colleagues and counterparts in local government, and hopefully actually get onto the same page so that we can start ensuring that we can work together to ensure that we're investing wisely into the future needs for public and active transport, which includes some of the infrastructure needs actually, and some of the other parameters which I've touched on, which impact on reducing congestion and assisting traffic flows. And then ultimately utilising those better relationships where we're on the same page to partner better with Waka Kotahi and to let them know what our priorities are as governors of each of our organisations working together. So look, my view is these meetings have been extremely positive and constructive to date. We've sort of set the ground rules and we understand what our objectives are. And ultimately, we're trying to, and mostly we're on the same page in terms of the objectives, which is more people in public transport, less people in cars, and the range of support that gives our economy and our communities in terms of improvements to all of the different objectives we're trying to meet through public and active transport. So really, happy to take the paper as read. Again, it's largely for noting. But I've commented on some of the topics that I've just touched on.
Before I just take any questions, I wondered if Councillor, if you had anything you'd like to add, having been to all those meetings as well.
Look, yeah, it's been. I just endorse what Pim has said. Good to have this paper here. It's been a positive start with the two working with the two City Council and Queenstown Lakes. They've clearly got skin in the game. We've got skin in the game. The closer we're aligned, the better for all. Because at the end of the day, this is about customer services to try and serve our community by way of public transport in both centres. And if we can, iron out issues before they escalate and become problems for our customers, well and good. I think it's really important that the executive leadership from both organisations are in the room at the same time as well. So it's not only a governance to governance, it's also CE to CE, transport GM to transport GM. So I think it's a really, really valuable mechanism to ensure that PT continues to be delivered in a smooth fashion. It seems to be running smoothly at the moment. I'm sure there will be hiccups along the way, but like I say, we've got this sort of backstop, but working in a proactive way to ensure that we can continue with a safe, reliable, efficient service for both areas.
And Chair Robertson, you've come up to Queenstown on several occasions to do this as well. Would you like to?
I have, yeah. I have been helping out chairing these in Dunedin and Queenstown. I just want to say that our region extends right, to its boundaries, and actually Queenstown is our home, as based on earlier comments we've had. We share issues. It's not your issue or our issue, and that's why we're really keen to give focus to both Dunedin and Queenstown in this realm. There's no point in pointing fingers at each other, because actually these issues are really important to both, to all three councils and to our communities. So we need to get out of that setting into what are the solutions to the issues. So that's really where we're at, and the best way to do that is to actually have conversations with each other. So yeah, we've been looking at the planning regime that we've both got, which is the Regional Land Transport, the GPS, which was very unsure at the moment, as we've just seen, the Regional Land Transport Plan, which we do in collaboration, and then the Regional Public Transport Plan and our long-term plan as well. So actually how all of those affect all three councils. So, how do we line up our time frames? How do we have open communication? How do we plan effective programs? Queenstown has massive congestion issues, and that's our problem as well, particularly given our interest in public and active transport, but just in general too. Coming to a standstill is not in anyone's interest. So yeah, we're having some great conversations. We're also understanding issues. We're understanding the operational environment too. So ahead of coming to this committee, we can understand some of our operational papers. So our councils can understand, hey, you know, these are this is how we're looking in terms of public transport at the moment. These are some of the plans we've got towards the future, and just a lot more transparency. So yeah, we can look at how we can actually design services that meet needs into the future. We're also understanding the constraints, and at the moment we've got a few, with the GPS being very unsure still. So we don't know what funding we've actually got to work with at the moment. That makes it quite difficult. But if we can have a joint voice on issues, as has already been alluded to, we're going to have a lot more success than pointing fingers at each other. So speaking with one voice is something that we are aspiring to through this. Then we can partner effectively with Ōtahi. For example, Queenstown not being included in a tier 1 area is a little bit crazy, given the congestion issues and the investment we know needs to go on there. So yeah, that's the type of conversations we're having, and they're going really well.
Thanks very much for the updates here. And as the person who actually lives in Queenstown and sits around this table, I very, very much appreciate the effort that everyone's putting into this. Thank you, because it is huge challenges, big problems, and we're better off working together, as explained. We had, I think, a question from you, Councillor Webb.
Yeah, two questions.
Two questions, and Michael Law's next.
And they are both around the considerations that are included here, which it's good to see. Well, first of all, it's good to see all the positive progress within this report, but it's also good to see a lot of detail in the considerations there. I think important. The climate change considerations one I just was noting the decarbonisation by 2029. Am I correct in that our plan is to have our Dunedin fully electric by 2026 rather than 2029, and almost fully electric at some date before then? And then are our plans for Queenstown similar as well?
Sorry.
I was going to say, you can jump in, but I guess the position that we have at the moment is that the electrification of the fleet will happen on renewal of the contracts, and that is what is driving the timeframes. I'll let either Pim or Lorraine discuss the timeframes as it relates to Dunedin and Queenstown to give you an idea, but that's the position the council's currently taking on electrification, i.e. no, not to accelerate, but to use contract renewal processes. But Pim or Lorraine, in terms of timing?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say the same thing, actually, Richard. It does come down to when those contracts are renegotiated. We've just extended by 2 years our Unit 5, I think, in Dunedin City. So that's going to be another 2 years away before that contract is completed in terms of negotiation, but it will be, I expect, fully electric. And as you know, we've got electric buses coming into Unit, I think Unit, is it Unit 4 or Unit 2, Lorraine, at the end of this year? Unit 4, I think.
Three.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, Unit 3. So we've got, I think, 4 buses for electric.
Around years. I don't know whether Julian or Lorraine can just give us a very quick answer on what the year is in terms of those contract renewals.
Yeah, so they'll start in 25, 26, but there's separate legislation around the ordering of diesel vehicles. So beyond, I think it's the 31st of September 2024, I think you cannot order any more new diesel vehicles anyway. Doesn't mean, but it will come into how we tender for our vehicles, and you know.
My question is that just the last year the council made an announcement that the bus fleet would be fully electric by 2026, and some other dates, and first electric bus is coming in October this year. Has that changed?
I have to check that out.
Okay, cool.
We'll have a look at that one. Okay.
Sorry, yeah, there was one more.
Another one.
Right, similar also on the considerations. I was just wondering what whereabouts the target of doubling commuter uptake from 4% to 8% sits.
So again, that relates to the fares and frequency business case, and I think we're going to be discussing that in a later paper. So if we could leave that till then, please.
Councillor Laws.
Hi. Listen, it's fantastic that you are having something to do on a more formal basis in terms of interactions with both Dunedin and Queenstown. But I think that clauses 14 and 15 are where the rubber meets the road on this report. And I am concerned that we are not utilising this election time to put pressure on all the political parties around particularly redefining Queenstown's public transport needs and funding for it. So the question I have, and my concern might be all placed. The question I have is, have any of these meetings with the councils sought to lobby at a political level the funding decisions around public transport, particularly in Queenstown?
Yeah, I think probably the three council members would be able to respond to that in terms of the conversations that have happened with your governance colleagues.
We have absolutely had those discussions, and they're also part of the future development strategy in Queenstown, which our focus in that and around that future development strategy table is to push directly to the ministers that are there. That has included the Minister of Transport to the needs of transport in Queenstown.
Yeah, that's exactly the point I'm trying to make, you see, Alexa. What about the National Party? What about the ACT Party? What about, Greens or New Zealand First? I mean, if you're just going to be talking to the Minister of Transport, your political lobbying is not going to be as effective, particularly in the lead up to an election, as if you're talking to all parties and putting some public and political pressure upon them to increase funding, given this appalling decision that excludes Queenstown from being a Tier 1 public transport case.
Discuss putting political pressure on. So, yep, that's a good point.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, now that we accept that, can we start? It's 10 weeks to the election. Can we move? I mean, can we actually make these public issues prior to the time? Can we get some understanding? Can we put some pressure on the local candidates? There's a new candidate in Waitangi, Miles Anderson. This is a very close and contested election. Waiting for some sort of strategy after the election is not going to be putting much pressure on them, is it?
Thanks for that, Michael. We'll note that.
Noting's not good enough.
Well, we
that's
don't.
That's just pathetic.
Are you here?
Noting's doing nothing.
It's not doing nothing. Yeah, we're asking in question time, and that's where we are. Thank you very much. Do we have any further questions on this item? Councillor Malcolm.
Well, yeah, just possibly, and if I could direct it to Councillor Laws through you, Chair, would that be a possible additional recommendation that he may make for this committee to add? So if I could just highlight that, thank you, in the next stage of the process. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely put that into an additional motion if you'd like to do so and send it through, Michael.
Can I do that now?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Thank you. The Otago Regional Council petition all the major parties to re-examine the public transport funding decision.
Okay, what point do I?
As per allocating Queenstown as a Tier 2 Queenstown Centre for Waka Kotahi involvement.
Can you write that down, Michael, or did you write that down as you went? Because we haven't.
No, I made it up as I went along. I'll send it to you.
Would you send that through to you, Julie?
Yes, please.
Send that through. Is that the governance address? The governance address, please, Michael. Send that through, and we will Do you have a seconder for that? Is anybody willing to second?
Yep.
Okay, good. So we have something to go ahead with there.
Can I ask a question of that?
Yes,
Is
please.
Queenstown Central, which is problematic in its own name, or Queenstown Lakes District Council, which would then allow it to go wider?
Okay, it's fine by me.
Comfortable.
Queenstown Lakes District Council then.
It's how most of the others are done.
Okay, is there any further questions on this item? Do we have a seconder to note, somebody to move noting this report? Councillor Noon, thank you, and a seconder. Councillor Wiener, what's our process here, Richard? Do we take Michael's motion first?
Process wise.
This note first.
We can
and
take this
then
note
we
first.
Make another motion.
Okay, and that gives Michael a chance. So all in favour of that? We have a mover and seconder, that's good.
Are
And
you doing the base one while we've got the word?
we're
on
doing the
first?
base one first, yeah, noting the report, which was moved by Councillor Noon, seconded by, who was the seconder? Councillor Weir, all in favour of noting the report.
Aye.
Do we have Councillor Laws's?
Just bring that up.
Okay, thank you. Have you sent that through, Michael?
No, it's going to take too long to type. I'm a one-person typer and I've got the flu.
Okay, read it out to me again, I'll write to take it down.
Sure, thank you.
Oh,
That
it's all right.
the Otago Regional Council.
Hold on, Michael, hold on, we think it's here. Thanks, team. Okay. Yeah, yeah, I'm happy with that.
Lobby?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Advocate. Advocate's a nice word. We're not a lobby party, we're a voice for the people.
Thanks, Michael. Getting there.
No, thank you, and thank you.
Just going to share my screen.
Share it and it's coming up.
Just 1 minute, we're just waiting for that to. Should be.
Okay, yeah, we can see it there. It's not very big at the moment, but I'm sure you're going to fix it. There it is. Can you see that too, Michael?
I can, thank you.
So we've moved and seconded and voted on the notes of support. So we're just looking at that the Otago Regional Council chairperson lobby all of the major political parties to examine the decision to define Queenstown Lakes District Council as a Tier 2 centre for Waka Kotahi public transport involvement.
Can we make that a positive action that we advocate that Queenstown Lakes District Council is made a Tier 1 centre?
Are you all right to do that, Michael? That the Otago Regional Council be made?
That's fine. Well, that's the intent. So yes, that's much more precise. Thank you, Kate.
And heavy.
Centre, thanks, Kevin.
And it's not.
Above the lobby is advocate. Advocate. All of the major parties to, no, so you just go advocate all of the major political parties to define Queenstown. So you don't need to examine decisions.
Clarification,
Councillor.
not to be pedantic, but we have a definition of major. This is just
Ah,
current in Parliament.
So let's say all political parties, why wouldn't we? So would that be, well, how do we do that? Because if you're saying major, does that mean just the ones that are in government now, which would leave out your New Zealand First comment?
Well, you could put in those who are currently over 3% in the polls, but that would be the 5 that are there currently plus New Zealand First. Those who have a realistic aim.
I think top have got 4%, didn't they?
Look, this is the challenge of motions on the fly and
Exactly.
trying to come up with something. I think that between myself and the chair, we understand what Michael has requested.
Yeah.
And staff can provide support for the chair to do that, to try and define every, and I absolutely appreciate your question, in a motion now is just not
Too
something
hard.
we're going to get to.
Just advocate. Sorry, I was probably going to speak on it actually, sorry.
Okay, so we'll leave that sitting as it is, Michael, and we're just going to have some, just open some discussion now. And I think I've got Councillor Robertson.
Yes, Michael wants to speak.
Or Michael, did you want to speak to it first, or do you feel you've already done that?
No, I think it's self-explanatory. Thank you very much.
Have a right of reply, maybe. If you need one.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to touch on the fact that this is a report about our joint approach with two councils where we've come to a action as part of that report, which is okay, but it's actually not relevant to this report because this is a report on what's been happening with those councils, so if I was to do that, I'd definitely want to be contacting the people who this report is about, which is actually Dunedin and Queenstown, in terms of what our council was going to be doing, I think.
Any further discussion here? I would like to comment in the same way that I am not comfortable doing that outside of those two groups. We are all in this together. We don't, in my view, we don't go and just do something off on our own back without consulting them. That has been the problem in the past, and I wouldn't be happy to do that, but I'd be happy for us to take it to them. So I won't be voting for that. Councillor Wilson?
Oh, process-wise, I don't mind it being a subsequent motion because it does reflect things we've been discussing in that paper. But I do take, the issue I have is more that why would you do one, not the other? And that is, I think, where it would really upset Dunedin that we weren't suggesting, given their demographics and their size, that's where I'd have the problem. I think it's a really good thing that we need to be doing and advocating. Whether it requires a motion is another thing, but also we have to do it probably more subtly.
And I would agree. So I'd be very worried about doing that without talking to our partners.
Part of the motion, lies with the partners.
Michael's okay. We have a second, and let's vote on that. So, all in favour of? Would you like to speak?
I was just going to speak to it. My assumption would be that the chair, knowing that the chair and being part of those groups, that she would actually be talking, that the chair would actually be talking to those groups anyway to say that we've passed this motion, this is what we and what you want to contribute. So I don't know. I've actually got no problem with that at all in that sense. And the Queenstown issue, the only way the Queenstown issue is going to change is if we have funding, and that's an immense amount of funding, and that will not come from development contributions. It won't come from just Queenstown alone. So it must go, and that's what I was trying to get at before, that Queenstown alone will not fix this issue. It must be central government funding, because the importance of Queenstown for a central area and Queenstown for the whole of New Zealand. So this is where the lobbying should be happening, or the advocation. So I hope you all support the intent of the motion. Thank you.
Okay, the motion, all in favour? Oh, did you?
Yeah,
have
well,
something?
I guess, yes, it's just, I suppose, into this, I take on that idea that because of the emphasis we are currently putting on building up good relationships with those two councils in particular, that I think that's a good idea, but essential that we talk to them about it before we did it. And that motion doesn't appear to allow us to do that.
Okay, put the motion.
Can I have a right of reply now then?
Okay, we've got Councillor Noon and then Councillor Law's right of reply, and then we're going to close it up and move on.
In light of the comments around the table, the appropriateness of having this motion under this item, I just wondered whether it could be held back or withdrawn and then added to a more appropriate item, i.e. 8.3, the next item.
And the patronage report.
Some other than this one, because I do, we've actually made some good progress with both the TAs, Dunedin and Queenstown, and I wouldn't like to put a get amongst the pigeons, spat on the works, whatever
I
you
don't
like
want
to
to do
say.
that
We're not
either.
going to fix it on either places.
But it's still important to do, absolutely acknowledge that, but just have it under an appropriate agenda item.
He's put it, and it's got a seconder, we need to put the motion, so all in favour, please say, oh, Michael, you wanted a right of reply, go ahead.
We've only got a very limited period of time here. And one of the great criticisms of the Otago Regional Council is that it doesn't react very well to immediate stuff that requires immediate action. I have no difficulty with informing our TA partners that we've passed this motion. That's, I would thought, just good manners. But you want to be lobbying and advocating now. The longer this gets kicked down the can, as Councillor Malcolm's pointed out, the longer it is away from a solution. And the only solution for Queenstown is if central government come to the party. And at the moment, they've walked away from the party and they're going to make the public transport and congestion issues of that region very, very much worse as a consequence. Now, like I said, it's 10 weeks to the election. Are we going to wait until after it's over? Until we've dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's before we are actually going to try this one window of opportunity to get some sort of promise or at least some sort of intention indicated by the parties that are standing for central government roles?
Thanks, Michael.
I just, at the indulgence of the mover, I just wonder if he would accept an amendment to that motion that would read that the council chairperson advise the PATCA group members and advocate.
What about Wordsmith?
I'm just saying that time is my issue, Brian. Yeah. They're not going to say no to that, but might actually say, well, we'll jump on board with you.
Suggestion
Michael
to
needs to agree.
Michael.
I'll agree with anything that is consensus of my colleagues.
Okay, let's so you've agreed, let's put that motion. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, say no.
Sorry, it's not clear what exactly. I'm sorry, I'm not.
That the Otago
This
region-
one is written.
Yes.
Right, thank you.
advise
Sorry.
of members and.
No.
Yeah, it's changed up there. It's changed up.
Changed.
Yeah.
Last time, all in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
No.
I call for a division.
Going to have a division. Okay.
Okay, councillor Forbes,
No.
councillor Kelleher,
Yes.
councillor Laws,
Yes.
councillor Malcolm,
Yes.
councillor McCall,
No.
councillor Metham,
Yes.
councillor Noon,
No.
councillor Robertson,
Aye.
councillor Scott,
Yes.
councillor Somerville,
Yes.
councillor Weir, councillor Wilson.
I'm going to abstain. I'd rather have Dunedin in there too.
Okay, so we have 5 for and 6 against and 1 abstention.
Sorry, I think you have 6 for and 5 against.
Yeah,
And one
otherwise-
abstention.
Oh, sorry, yes, sorry, I do apologise, councillor. The other way around.
So the motion's carried. Thank you very much. We will move on. Okay, I think we're up to the Queenstown and Dunedin full year patronage report. It's updating the performance. I think we've got Julian, you coming for that, and Gemma. Is Gemma here? That was Julian. Oh, it's Julian. Thank you. So this is updating the committee on performance of public transport, bus and ferry and total mobility services for the last financial year. I think it's pretty straight ahead and it's looking like some good progress has been made. And thank you, Julian, in your hands. And thank you, Doug, for your writing.
Yeah, really just opening up to any questions. In brief, both networks Dunedin and Queenstown in all areas, bus, total mobility and ferry have increased in patronage. In particular, there's a couple of tables on, I think, page 24 and 27 that were asked for at the previous committee meeting, where a councillor, I don't remember who, asked for the actual data on patronage going back to 2018-19, which was the last year of patronage. This wasn't affected by driver shortages or COVID or anything like that. And the interesting thing about the data for our patronage increases is that we're at a level overall which is higher than that sort of pre-COVID, pre-driver shortage period or previous high period of 2018-19 financial year. But it's a mixture of Dunedin. Both networks are performing very strongly. Queenstown is still slightly behind where it was in 2018-19, but recovering. And again, ferry, which in Queenstown is heavily affected by the borders or the opening of borders to tourists, which took place in the financial year, which this data reports on. The ferry increases would have been significantly affected by that. And total mobility has, as you may know, a change in subsidy where effectively you now pay, if you were taking $100 journey before, you'd pay $50 towards that journey. You'd now pay $25. It's a permanent instalment of the larger subsidy in place. So we expect to see total mobility, popularity or patronage and distance travel continue to rise. Other than that, just looking for any questions or comments.
Councillor Scott.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you, for paragraph 10, which basically, says, as I think you outlined, Julian, 10% increase from the 2018-19 financial year. And at that time, it wasn't disrupted by COVID and driver shortages. Two questions. So, what's changed since then? We've also had subsidies, and we've got currently have some subsidies, central government subsidies. So, do I put that 10% on the basis of the subsidies? That's my first question. And the second one is, should we be satisfied by that? We're putting a lot of work in for 10% increase. And I like, it's hard work.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things in that. Firstly, the subsidy bit is important because I think for all of the period, the financial year we're reporting on, the half price fares were in place. So a couple of the comments that we have in there about patronage are followed by a statement saying, hey, bearing in mind that fares were half price for the year. So this month is the first month we've returned to full fares. So we haven't got this month's data yet, so we'll get it at the end of the month, but indicatively it doesn't look much different. But we'll find out over the next couple of months or so what patronage looks like in comparison now that we're back to full fares. But as well as being back to full fares, so standard adult fare in Dunedin or Queenstown is $2 on a B card. There are also new subsidies that weren't in place previously. That's the Community Connects subsidy. There are cheaper child fares, and so the matrix of fares is cheaper overall. Standard adult prices are the same, but a lot of students, people under the age of 25 will be benefiting from cheaper fares. So we're sort of in a situation where we've had a very good year in terms of patronage recovery. A portion of that recovery, I'm not sure what, may be because of the fact that the prices of fares were cheaper, with everything being a half price. At the same time, a huge chunk of that year, going on 6 months of it, I think, we were running heavily reduced timetables and with severe driver shortages, which would have affected patronage quite a lot. So there's
Okay.
negatives and positives. So I still think the end result is relatively strong considering the environment
Yes.
we're working in.
Okay. We've had difficulties, we've recovered. But it's not the quantum shift we're after, is it? It's not a 50% increase or.
I don't think it would, a 50% increase would happen in that timeframe. I think it's, I'd love it if it did, but I'm not sure I know what I've got the levers to pull to do that. But I think even with, it's, I think my view is it's, I can only report on the figures, and I think it's a positive result given the environment we're in.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's a
Thank
good
you.
reply.
Thanks. I'm going to go to Pam next, and then we're going to do Kate and Andrew. Pam?
Yes, look, I was just wanting to agree with Julian in answering you, Brian.
Yeah.
Look, we've just had a really difficult 12 months with a massive driver shortage, which has happened in every part of New Zealand, and so we can't imagine that hasn't impacted. It has on the reputation of our service, and you're well aware of that. And when I was interim chief executive, I put my head on the block and I said, we'll go back to a full timetable on the 1st of February in Dunedin, and ultimately we weren't able to do that for Queenstown until the 1st of June. So, we've only just got back to full timetables. We know the services have taken a bit of a bruising in the media, and yet we're already back to where we were pre-COVID and 28% above where we were a year ago. So I think we should celebrate this. It's still only a first step, but we should celebrate that so many of our customers have come back to us, even though they know that we've had a very difficult year. And by the way, it's still my view that Dunedin was the first city in New Zealand to get back to a full service and a full cohort of drivers. There's still shortages of drivers in a lot of places in Wellington and Auckland and other parts of the North Island even now. So I still feel that even though we've had a difficult year, we've done extraordinarily well. And yes, Brian, of course we have targets which are higher than 10% over 5 years. And I'm hoping that patronage growth will, on the back of the fact that we've now solved the driver shortage issue, that we'll see that much more significant growth happening over the next 5 to 10 years.
Cool. Well done, Pam. Well done, team.
Thanks, Pam. And yeah, I do recognise the work that's taken to get here. We have Kate, and then Andrew, and then Kevin.
Well, I just wanted to ask a different question. I mean, I'm not quite sure how to get a really good smile on Lorraine, Pam, and Julian's faces, but if I had asked for a report with a 5% increase over what was a wonderful summer compared to anyone else, and that in a really quiet time of the year, given that petrol prices were also being subsidised, I think this is an outstanding result from the people of Dunedin, not just the staff. And there's a whole lot of drivers to it. And I think anyone who has listened to the news and hear that the climate changes are really occurring at a faster rate than we possibly anticipate may want to focus on why other people may be wanting to be taking more action than others. I really want to say well done to the staff and to the people of Dunedin for putting up what was not the optimal service and yet doing the right thing. And I think it's outstanding. And I'm really impressed with the delivery by the staff to get that happening. I would have been scared if we'd got a 50% increase, because there may have been 50% of more people wanting to do it, but I'm not sure that the services would have coped. So I think it's excellent, well done. And I hope Julian, you are allowed to smile.
Yeah.
Andrew.
Thanks for this patronage report. V-card transactions in Dunedin, 92%, in Queenstown, 82%. Question around moving away from cash. Does that ultimate goal align with the new universal ticketing system that we're planning for another couple of years? Is that our plan going forward?
I think firstly, the reason for that differential is primarily tourism. We think tourism, yeah. So you've got people coming off the plane in large numbers. It's extremely popular, the bus service and stop for tourists at an airport, which in my experience is quite unusual. And we do have retail in the airport now that we didn't have previously. That's via a retail store within the airport itself, retailing D cards. So, but that's only been in place for a couple of months. That might reduce the volume of cash transactions, but the vast majority of the year, people who didn't already have a B card, people who weren't from other regions, would have been going to the bus and paying cash to get a B card if they wanted to use the bus. So I think that will decline. Yeah, I wasn't sure what your question
Yeah,
was
so
about
that- so
full cash.
ultimately,
Yeah.
the ideal situation would be to eliminate cash out of the system. So my question is, once we move to a universal card regime, which I assume all customers will be able to use a basic Visa card or whatever.
Yeah.
Would that be the time where cash will eventually be eliminated out of the system? And I'm just really coming from I don't know, safety but I understand the tourism issue and a lot of people deal with cash.
Yeah, the short answer is I don't know, but I would suspect yes. So it did signal in our RPTP that we would transition away from it. I can see Lorraine's got her hand up, so she may answer it better than me.
Over to you, Lorraine.
Yes, can I help out, please? So we are moving to the national ticketing solution, and the objective of the national ticketing solution is to have cash-free travel. Because that is scheduled to start rolling out from next year through till 2026, we wouldn't be looking as the regional council or even as the RITS, the Regional Integrated Ticketing Consortium, to move to cash-free before that ticketing solution comes in.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Are you right there, Andrew? Okay, thanks. We'll move on to Kevin and then Tim.
Yeah, look, Julian and your team, you probably had the perfect storm of everything that could go wrong over the last 2 or 3 years with COVID. You've had government stepping in and we're not knowing when the fees are going to go free and how long that's going to last. We've had no drivers. We've had a whole heap of events that have been completely out of your team's control, and you've been blasted from everywhere. Yet we've still got here, and we've got a bus service that, for all intents and purposes, is running pretty good. So congratulations, and I mean that I'm saying Julian's team, so that goes all spectrums around your team, Julian. I think it's just absolutely superb, and the fact that we've got a 10% increase, so people are still coming back to buses. So it's probably time now, and hopefully we don't get another COVID, and hopefully we have the drivers, and you can actually run a bus service in normal conditions. So very well done, and thanks for sticking with us, because I think there is an exciting pathway forward. And if you want to come to Omri with the service, I'm happy for you to run it. So there you have it. So my question is around that.
Your question?
No, and it truly is an important one. It's around total mobility, and so there's been good subsidies in place. I'm talking to a few people that have been using the service in Dunedin and are really impressed with the service. Are there any barriers that you see in the way of that service, so we could perhaps reach more people that need that service?
There are a few things that could be considered barriers. So the first thing is the maximum amount that you can subsidise, the maximum amount subsidy we can actually get on a trip, which I think is $25. Am I right, Jack? $37.50, I apologise. But with the price of fuel and taxi fares and so on, if people live out in Taieri Mouth or Palmerston and someone want to come to hospital, then it becomes a valuable contribution, but it's a very different scheme compared to either getting the bus in or people who live in the city and take shorter drives. So the cost of private hire travel hasn't decreased over the last few years, but so it is expensive versus public transport. I suppose it's a key thing. One of the sort of qualifying factors for using total mobility is the general inability to access public transport. Therefore, in most cases, total mobility will be their only option. But in the best of scenarios, if they're taking a couple of kilometre journey, it's significantly more expensive than $1 or $2 on the bus. So there's the cost will be a barrier for someone, regardless of how good the service is.
Yeah. And what about suppliers? Sorry, a subsequent question, Chair. Have we got enough suppliers for the services, and are there any barriers to them?
I think if it's okay for the chair, Jack, who is resident expert, might give some comment on supply. Certainly, wheelchair accessible vehicles has been a continuing issue for us, but I'll let Jack speak to it.
So the wheelchair hoists suppliers and total mobility is a ongoing issue. It is around the country, and we have a certain amount of funding set aside to subsidise installation of wheelchair hoists, and we generally don't spend all of that because there's no one to get it. A lot of the wheelchair operators are very, very busy, they're overworked, just like some of our bus drivers, I guess. And the payments are regarded by a lot of total mobility councils around the country as not quite high enough to fund or to create an incentive for that. So we're probably a little bit low on the number of hoist vehicles, especially in smaller towns. And obviously smaller towns right across total mobility is a challenge. Obviously, total mobility is an area where our public transport network extends beyond just Dunedin and Queenstown. And that Oamaru is our second biggest centre for total mobility by quite a margin, including hoist vehicles. Queenstown and Wanaka are very small in total mobility, which I guess is due to not many rest homes in Queenstown and Wanaka. And those who do live there might have a bit more wealth and therefore a little bit less need. But even below that, we've got one car in Balclutha, and we no longer have an operator in Alexandra or Cromwell, which we did in the past. So there's all sorts of challenges with the supply of vehicles. In Dunedin, we have a very dominant operator, that's Dunedin Taxis, who might have a 60% market share, but there's lots of other smaller competitors. The overall numbers are probably fine outside of the hoist vehicles, the wheelchairs, which are a challenge. And based on the experiences elsewhere around the country, they'll continue to be a challenge around New Zealand. But that's something we do need to keep putting energy into.
Thanks very much. Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. I'll go to Tim and then to Gary.
Point 29 in the report, Queenstown Ferry. I just wondered about clarifying the figure, the fare revenue showing 972,334,000, close to $1 billion of fare revenue for the ferry. I'm wondering if it's still for sale.
At the same price.
I think that should be 1,000. Yeah.
97,000.
Yeah, I will get that checked. Yeah, it's definitely not a million. Yeah.
And this is just a lesson for councillors. Please pay attention to the financial information that comes through.
That's why I was telling Queenstown to fund their roading.
Thanks for that, Tim. Okay, Gary.
Yeah, well, actually, I had exactly that question. But say, I assume the number is just shy of $1 million as opposed to just shy of $1 billion. So if it is just shy of $1 million, how is that tracking with our projections for the trial, given we are in a trial?
I don't have.
Lorraine, maybe we'll get Lorraine to answer that. Thank you.
Yeah, would you like me to step in?
Yes, please.
The patronage, again, as we mentioned before, is outstanding for the latest period. But over the whole period of the trial, the information has been extremely variable because of what Julian mentioned before around the susceptibility of patronage on the Queenstown network to the borders and to COVID and to the changes. And again, as mentioned before, possibly the impact of the ending of the 50% government subsidy for PT could have a more significant effect on the ferry services. So we are working through procurement for future ferry services based on the trials, but there are still a few pieces of data that we need to firm up how useful they are providing into that procurement process.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions on the patronage report? Moved Elliot, seconded. Who was that? Andrew, seconded Andrew. And all in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, our next paper is the Shaping Future Dunedin Fairs and Frequency Business Case, a progress report on that. Can update us on the progress. The last update was in May 2023. We've got 3 recommendations of this report. We note it. We note that we've been asked to note that the best mode shift is achieved from a zero rates option. And we've been asked to note that approval of the business case by Waka Kotahi is contingent on paid fares being a feature of the preferred option. Welcome, Doug.
Kia ora.
Nice to see you, and we're in your hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll briefly run through what the report is going to cover and remind you of the more recent meeting we had on the 10th of May. The business case has been developed as part of Connecting Dunedin, the partnership between DCC and ORC and Waka Kotahi. From this, Shaping Future Dunedin projects have been identified to address challenges in transport in the city. One of these is the fares and frequency business case. Essentially, the goal of this business case is to encourage mode shift from private vehicles to other forms to around 8% as a shift. And that target came from the Shaping Future Dunedin program business case. The fares and frequency business case has been developed to examine options for both fares and service levels for the delivery of the service in Dunedin. This report is an update on the progress we've made since May. A number of combinations of fares and service levels have been analysed and modelled using a number of different tools. Public transport is one of these tools to move the mode shift target. The report's going to show that low fares and increased service levels or combinations of the both increase mode shift. Currently, our indicative preferred package is outlined in the report, essentially in summary, 15-minute frequencies during the day on primary routes and in peaks for secondary routes, as well as retaining the current levels of service for our targeted routes, which is Palmerston currently, and our upcoming express service in Nosgiel. Discussions with Waka Kotahi have confirmed they are comfortable with the levels of service being proposed in this package. I'm happy to take questions.
Questions, people? Anybody got anything to ask?
Yes, me, please, sorry.
Councillor Laws, then Councillor Webb, and then Councillor Scott.
Thank you. And thank you for your report. The report notes that that the best mode shift is achieved from a zero fares option. But that you haven't quite finished yet, I think, if you price it at 50 cents on a dollar. So that information or that modelling is yet to be provided to us. Is that correct?
That's correct. Currently, we're working through the economics of various fares.
Right. And if you were to move, though, to a zero fare regime, you would forego, is it over $3.6 million worth of revenue in Dunedin alone? Yeah.
From our current levels, yes, that revenue would not be attained.
Right. So that's a $3.6 million budget hole that we have to fill were we to move to a no fares option. Yes.
That's correct. We would lose revenue.
Right. And Waka Kotahi so far have indicated that they are not going to support that business case. Have I got that right too?
What they've indicated is that they have no policy position that supports free fares.
What they're really saying is they don't have any money. Isn't that what they're really saying? They don't have a $3.6 million budget to fill that hole.
I can't speak for Waka Kotahi Council.
No, that we haven't made the request for that, Michael. So we've got to be careful. It is based on policy position, and that is the way that the business case process runs. So for us to say that, assume that that decision is based on whether or not they have funding available would be incorrect.
Oh, I think it's probably related, but okay, all right, fair enough. So, and then the next issue is, we got it wrong last time we modelled a $2 fare in terms of we expect there to be more mode shift and there wasn't. And as soon as COVID was out, people got back into that car as quick as they could. Are you confident that this is sufficiently robust that our figures now are right, even if you move to free fares?
When you categorise modelling, you can only be as confident as the tools you're using. The conditions when the $2 fares were introduced is some time ago now, and also the economic conditions were different, fuel prices were different. So it's hard to measure that. What the model's based it on is behavioural choice. So there is a calculation that they made for that. So with the conditions being different, the models are adjusted to the current day, and we can only be as confident as the model's output. And it's
No, that's fair enough. And I think the point you make about cost of living is well made. Yeah, that's fair enough too. Which takes to the next thing. So let's just say that your modelling with free fares ends up with a massive uptake of free passenger transport in Dunedin. And you're talking about the foregone revenue of $3.6 million. So that's what you're not going to get anymore from what it currently is. Wouldn't the cost of that be greater than $3.6 million? Because I'm not now just having to worry about the fact that that's the bit that came in from the public, but that I've now got more people travelling, which means presumably I've got a greater supply level required, more services necessary to meet that anticipated demand.
If the service levels are approved for funding, then that service level is approved for funding. So it's dependent on what Kotahi would fund at that time. So yeah, we will lose revenue from zero fares, but we'll increase patronage and we'll increase the use.
But won't that mean that at peak times in particular, including schools, but in peak, it doesn't matter, peak time travelling in Dunedin, that you'll have more people seeking to use your services and therefore need to put more service on to meet that demand?
Yes, that would make sense, Councillor, yes.
So it would cost more than $3.6 million, wouldn't it?
Well, I don't have those calculations, but one would assume that's the case.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Lovely. Lorraine, would you like to just chip in there before we go to other questions?
If I could just clarify that the business case is looking at fares and frequency. So the frequency is a cost that's in the business case, that for the level of service, like the number of buses that you have to put on to carry that capacity. So it's you weigh it up like this. Obviously, there is a cost for carrying more passengers, and there's a loss of fare revenue, but it's finding the balance between the number of additional services versus the additional or the loss of revenue that you would get against what revenue you wouldn't get if you didn't have enough services to carry the capacity or the demand. And I would just like to point out that currently we are hoping to, or we're trying to get a workshop scheduled in with the councillors to bring a little bit more of information around those variances to you for consideration.
Thanks, Lorraine. That's very helpful. Councillor Weir. And then Councillor Scott.
Two questions once more. I was first just wondering if there were any more details about package 16 and the levels of service that are included in these calculations, and like what the frequencies actually are and that kind of thing. If that's available anywhere.
Through the chair, Councillor, that can be provided. It was covered briefly in the previous meeting, but happy to provide that.
That would be great. So do you circulate that through governance, please?
Thanks. And then the other question, this might also have been already come up, but I was wondering if it was just these singular fares that were considered, or if other fare options, like monthly passes or free off-peak or free for certain demographics or anything were included in these considerations?
No, it's basically looking at the fare per trip. So yeah, so the concessions can be built into it, but also part of the modelling is taking account of our-price shares, child fares, for example, all those sort of things. They're built into the modelling when they're done.
But no new possibilities?
No, not at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, cool.
Oh, sorry, hang on, we'll just get him to chip in there. He might have some more information on that one.
I was just going to say, Alexa, we've got a target to double the number of people travelling at peak time from 4% to 8% in Dunedin City. So that's what this business case is about. We never expected to achieve that target without having to spend some money. That's what the investment, the likelihood is that to achieve doubling of the number of people travelling at peak time in public transport was going to mean an investment of some sort into public transport. So it's true that there's a trade-off. If we reduce fares further, we lose fare revenue. And it's true that if we increase frequencies, we will have to pay more for contractors. So there will be a cost to increasing, to achieving that mode shift.
Offset presumably by some of the code benefits. Lorraine, did you want to chip in there?
Just a clarification. So we can have within the fares some fare structure changes and concessions. What the business case is done on is the average cost. So we're comparing an average fare across all of the fare structures of 50 cents, $1 against what we have now. It's $2 because not everybody pays $2 now. We have concessions, but what that cost is.
Thank you. That is good clarification. Okay, I'm going to Councillor Scott, then Councillor Malcolm.
Cool. Just a clarification before this 8%, it's not plus 8%, it's actually 100%. It's a doubling of the number of people on the buses at peak time. Yeah, okay, so that's good. My question, my point, is around the under the recommendation which says it notes that the best mode shift is achieved from the zero fares option. And whereas I actually wonder, in fact, when I look at it, that the benefit of zero fares, it seems to me, looking at figure 2, where we achieve a mode shift of 6.9%, which is, okay, that's significant, going from 4 to 6.9, wow, that's significant. But nevertheless, it's only marginally above the dollar fare, which is 6.5%, and it's only 1.4% above the $2 fare. And so we're aiming for the 8%, we're getting 6.9. I actually wonder whether that recommendation sort of hides the reality that the benefit of the zero fare is actually relatively marginal. I actually wonder whether we should just stick with the $2 fare, get the 3.6 million of fare revenue, and then figure out what we're going to do with it. Can we actually invest it a bit better? For example, imagine if you have the $2 fares and you said, we're going to take that 3.6 million, and if you're the one lucky customer on that bus for the year,
Where's your question, Councillor Scott, please?
Sorry?
Where's your question?
This is the question. No, but I'm just trying to understand what's actually going on here, because I just wonder whether a blanket recommendation that zero fares is the best option.
Okay,
I'll answer the question.
Finish the question.
Yep.
If, for example, I'm being absurd, but if you took the 3.6 million and said, if you're the lucky customer, you get the 3.6 million. And you might find instead of getting from 4 to 8%, you get from 4 to 20%. Is this really worth the effort in terms of what we're doing here?
So this is a process that is set out nationally to deliver public transport services and to get the funding commitment from Waka Kotahi to do that. This is an update report on that process, and that business case, the work that has been done by all parties involved, notes that the best mode shift from all of the calculations they undertake is achieved from zero fares. That's not saying
it's only marginally above the others.
So I'm going to answer the question. That is the position of the business case at that point in time. There is further work to go to be brought back to this table for an in-depth discussion about everything from $2 to $3.6 million lottery options. But at the moment, staff have presented an update on the business case and what the work undertaken as part of the business case is saying. That's all it is. We're not putting a position forward for a vote.
No, I realise that. I'm just saying other conclusions actually truly representative.
The conclusions represent the outcome of the business case process, and that is what we are presenting.
Reasonable? Because it's only marginally better than the other option, the dollar.
Okay, so we'll move on. Pim, did you have something to add? You're just taking your hand down. I'm not sure.
Well, I was only going to agree with Richard. At the end of the day, the business case is a business case. It provides us on the basis of modelling with some options which the council will need to consider in the same way as the Waka Kotahi board might have to. So, Brian's points are perfectly valid. The likelihood is we're going to be spending more on public transport because we're looking at EVs and new contracts. It's likely that we're going to be spending more money anyway. At the moment, we spend about 35 million. 17 million comes from local share, so that's from our ratepayers and also user pays. So the likelihood is costs are going to go up. But we also we need to see continued patronage growth to justify that increased investment. So this is just part of the process, as Richard just pointed out.
Thanks, Tim. I'm going to Kevin and then Tim for questions, please.
It will be a question, but a point of clarification, it wouldn't be 3.6 million because he would have taken 1.5 for the eco fund, so it'd be only a $2 million prize.
Cool.
As we increase, Mr. Rogers, through the chair, as we increase the service and the business case is approved by Waka Kotahi, do they basically pay the same percentage for each service that we add on?
We have the same FAR rate, yeah.
Yeah, the same FAR rate. So if we, so we're getting so they don't even look at what we're charging. They're looking at the cost of the service.
Fair revenue. There is a fare box recovery policy, which I think is actually out of date now. That used to be 50%. So that's sort of by the wayside. So if we're talking about fair revenue from the fare box. That's entirely up to us.
So they don't match anything that we get from the fares. No. So we're getting zero. We take that $3.6 million away and the opportunity for a good prize. We take that away. We have to find that whole gap. And if we increase services, would be missing 4 million or whatever that increase in services might be.
And fair revenue that we miss out if we increase the service.
Yeah.
But we will still have a subsidised service.
The
fair part wouldn't. Yes.
Yeah, the FAR rate would still come to us.
That's correct.
Yeah, because they've approved in the business case. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Nicholl.
Now I've had to turn this into a question.
Yes, please.
And I've turned it into a question.
Yes, councillors will be eligible to go on the bus to get the prize.
I've got the financial hat on. So if we were to lose $3.6 million, how would this impact the annual budget?
So we haven't done those calculations because we're not at that stage of the process yet. And part of this process is establishing the position of Waka Kotahi on any FAR rate because they don't have that policy of zero fares at the moment. So there is still a lot of work to do. When it comes back to council for these decisions, then you can expect all of those questions around impacts on budgets to be available for you to inform that decision. But again, that's not where we're at in terms of the process. This is just the mechanics of the business case to give us the information to have those conversations.
So without the Waka Kotahi subsidy, I can answer the question.
Yeah.
It will mean that we will lose $3.6 million in revenue, and that would be a deficit in our budget. So that's the other side of the equation. And that goes on to ratepayers.
Yeah, it's got to be found.
That's correct. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'd really like to get this motion underway. Elliot, are you okay for all three?
Moving all three.
Moving all three, a seconder. Councillor Noon, thank you. Put the motion, unless there's any discussion. You speak to it, Nico.
Just to thank Tim and Lorraine and Doug for all the effort and progress that's been made in this. I'm very excited to see the final report when it comes out, and it's important to remember that this is just a progress report. I mean, personally, I'd love to be aiming for higher than 8%, but it's worth remembering that change is slow, especially when it comes to mode shift. These are the way people organize their entire lives. So people aren't gonna start going on the bus and throw away their car overnight just because the fares have gone down. And if you look at the figure 2, that mode share changes quite a bit on the 2034 to 35 bit. So these changes take ages to see the full effects from. And so it's important to keep that in mind. And I don't think we should be, ruling out any sort of trying to negotiate with Waka Kotahi over free fares or anything. So the benefits there. But service level improvement should probably be the priority, even if it's free. People aren't going to show up if people aren't going to go on the bus if it's not going to show up for them. But these are all parts of a much wider conversation that we'll be having later on. And so for today, I'm very happy with what we have here. And I'm excited for us to keep having these conversations as we go forward.
Thank you. And a final word from our seconder.
Yeah, this is a really important cosmic deal for the city, not only ourselves, but the city council are reliant on the frequency and fares business case outcome to be able to achieve a network that functions, particularly in the CBD, with the hospital build progressing and the various proposals that the city have got in and around the CBD to ensure that we have the traffic flows. This outcome is so important for the best possible sort of network operating efficiency that we can have in the city. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks. I'll put that motion. All in favour? Against? No, carried. Thank you very much. And thank you, Doug. That's been a big piece of work and it's awesome to see it getting.
I forgot I need to leave now.
We're going to take a 10-minute break, a cup of tea break. We'll be nice and fresh for our next package. Yes, that's the suggestion of health and safety. And we've got 2 papers left that we'll come back to at 3:05 and have them done. It's a good time. So adjourned for 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
I agree.
Yeah, no, exactly. They should be, that's not a case. They should be like 70, 60.
Hi, how are you? What do you want to do? Oh, I'm just.
CHE.
Kia ora team, welcome back. 2 more items to go.
I'm sharing my screen. I apologise.
That's all right, no problem at all. Have to. Queenstown Public Transport Services Business Case is our next item. Who've we got for this? Is that Elaine and Pim?
So it's the same as the last one.
Yeah.
Is that what we've just done? No.
No, this is the
This is the
Queenstown.
Queenstown Business Case. That's right. You're putting me off, Councillor Malcolm. It's not the one we just. Okay, so Lorraine, in your hands, let's talk about the update on this business case, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Really? Yep, thank you. The Queenstown Public Transport Services business case. This is an update and letting you know that it's progressing on budget. That's with previously agreed variations from September 22 and February 23, but still within our overall contingency. But that delivery is expected in December 23, and previously it was for September 23. And it's also advising what we've done in the last few months in terms of consultation and alerting, if you like, the councillors to the fact that we are preparing to go out for public consultation on the shortlist options for the business case. The material for this, that will be for late September. We didn't quite have the dates fixed at the time of the agenda close, and the material has not been finalised. So, but we will be bringing public consultation material back for approval, and we're also looking to have a workshop to present some of the high-level costings and some of the background information. Similar to what was talked about in terms of the last report, fares and frequency, what it means, what the costs are, where costs fall, and then what decisions those costs are kind of contingent on. So we're hoping to have a workshop on that. And then also going back to our first report, the intention was to bring Waka Kotahi to that workshop to present the current status of the NZ Up program. So the NZ Up program, as we mentioned briefly, is the big contributor to the infrastructure for Queenstown, which this PT services will have to run on. There are really strong correlations for that infrastructure delivery to the timing, and to a certain extent, potentially the cost of the PT services business case. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much. It's been an important and ongoing piece of work. This will be great to see it come in the next quarter. Councillor, no, any questions? Councillor Malcolm.
I was just happy to move when you're ready, Councillor.
Councillor Scott.
Previously in our debates, we talked about issues and challenges in Queenstown. Does this business case assume that some of those challenges solved? That, for example, we can put on more buses and some better routes, and a lot of these problems will go away, or is it contingent upon other things happening?
Sorry, did you want me to answer?
Please go.
So the business case recognises that there are a number of levers that we don't have control of, that aren't services that that business case will need to be in place to be successful. And that is why, as I've mentioned before, we're working under the Wakatipu Way to Go partnership. And so Waka Kotahi service delivery are very much involved in that. And we mentioned before the things like the Frankton Roundabout, but also the Frankton Bus Hub. But there are a whole suite of other interventions, including bus gates and bus gates associated with sort of pedestrian crossings along the 6A corridor. And on top of that, I think it was mentioned earlier, there are other actions which will be delivered through the TDM, Travel Demand Management business case that Queenstown Lakes District Council is preparing, and they may or may not look at like congestion charging type mechanisms, parking charges and other things to assist with the behaviour shift. But the premise of the services business case is that that we will have the capacity in our vehicles and our service spans and our frequencies to carry the required number of trips that need to shift from private, single occupancy vehicles onto PT.
Thank you.
Cool.
Anything else, Councillor Scott?
No, thank you.
Councillor Noon?
Yeah, a question for Lorraine, I believe. The report talks about the dialogue between yourselves or ourselves and Queenstown Airport. What's your level of confidence, because I've developed their own master plan, what's your level of confidence that the airport will be prepared to wait for us to eventually deliver this process, whatever that looks like? Obviously, it's subject to consultation, all the rest of it. Are they completely on board? I suppose is my question.
The airport.
Yeah. Oh, no, Queenstown.
So in my discussions, I would say, yeah, they're completely on board. I think they've got perhaps newly agreed and cemented objectives of themselves around carbon reduction and low emissions and what they want to achieve for the airport. And we're talking to them about how we can integrate both our works and what they want to achieve.
Sounds positive.
Good work. I don't think that there's any more questions from around this table. So thank you. I think this is well understood, this piece of work and where we're at. And I think Kevin Malcolm's willing to move those 2 points. And Councillor Noon will second it. And all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, anyone against? Great, we'll move on to 8.6, Public and Active Transport Connectivity Strategy. And this is about developing something a little more region-wide. It is, where are we up to? And there's progress here, which provides councillors with a proposed way forward in developing the regional public and active transport connectivity strategy. Attached to the report is a detailed project plan, and the plan itself demonstrates that there's a sound business case for undertaking this work to get started. So we're being asked to note the report to endorse a proposed approach to developing the public and active travel connectivity strategy, to approve a hybrid approach to resourcing public and active transport connectivity at ORC, which delivers a balance between accessing skilled support to establish a strategic approach while developing capability and practice in-house at ORC. We want to note the full implementation and delivery of our regional public and active transport connectivity. It does indicate ongoing transport program expenditure subject to this being approved for inclusion in the LTP. And we need to agree to receive regular update reports and to participate in workshop sessions during strategy development. This is quite an exciting moment for some of us that have been looking at a regional public transport strategy. In your hands, Lorraine, I think. Lorraine? Oh, no, Doug.
Yeah, actually, maybe I'll just kick off, Alexa, if I can.
Yep, that'd be great. Thank you, Tim.
Not all of you will be aware, but part of my job as the interim general manager for transport in the 6 months that I'm doing this role is to try and ultimately give Richard some recommendations around right-sizing our team. Now, we have made some appointments recently, I have to say, and Lorraine's been really successful. We've got 2 new planners and we're waiting for a lead planner vacancy that we've just advertised, but we're building the team up. But I just wanted to introduce this paper particularly by saying this has been a very busy time for us as a planning team. I mean, you've heard today just all of the different plans that we're responsible for over the next period between now and December. So look, we don't have the internal resource for this, is what I'm trying to get to, and you just couldn't anticipate that we could do this in-house right now. So I just wanted to open this paper by saying that I support the recommendations. Lorraine's done this piece of work. It's something you've been asking for a very long time. And if we're able to get this completed, over the next couple of months, 2 or 3 months to give you the sort of plan and planning project plan results that you've been asking for, then that will be fantastic, and I'm excited by it. So I just wanted to introduce this paper in that way.
Thank you very much. Any questions from around the table? Councillor Noon?
Yeah, my questions are just around the funding. Obviously, 23-24, we haven't got any funding for a project manager to drive this project, and also ongoing 24 and beyond 150k is the additional funding that's required as well. Question is, do Waka Kotahi stump up with 51% of both those numbers? I'm referring to the 80k for 23-24 and the 150k from 24 and beyond.
So just before Lorraine answers that question around Wakate subsidy, I'll just flag, I'll just speak very quickly to those recommendations after that, because I've just picked up a few things. Sorry. So Lorraine, can you just respond in terms of the Wakate subsidy for those figures?
Yes, so at the moment, all of the transport budget attracts FAR and the hybrid, the subsidy, and what the hybrid approach is, I guess, using what capacity we have in that new staff component that we're still getting, that Pim mentioned, to attract, I guess, and recruit specifically for a skill to start taking this work forward. So it can be accommodated in the budget, but it is a cost that doesn't have a line item associated with it. The ongoing costs, and we're recommending that because based on some experience from counterparts who've looked to deliver similar things, we believe that a longer term and a move to BAU in this area will, I guess, enhance the embedding it in our work, but also the ability to which we can assist our territorial authorities. So that would come through, as is indicated in the report, decisions in the LTP, and we would be putting it into the RLTP, and that's, if it's approved, that's when it gets attracted for, it attracts FAR at that point.
Thank you. So just on that, and apologies, this is me just having to adjust my thinking now. I'm on the final review of these reports again. That there's an approved recommendation in here that I don't believe that this committee has the delegation to approve.
Yeah.
And I actually think that approach is an operational decision around how we resource this piece of work. So we can just change that approves to notes in this instance. So it'll be a hybrid approach that's taken. It can be managed this year within budget. There is no ability to make a decision on future budgets at this meeting. It's a flag that through the LTP, Lorraine is indicating that resource will appear for consideration as part of Transport's ongoing budget. So it's important we do note that in here, but acknowledging that there can be no decisions made today about the long-term plan budget.
Thanks for that, Richard. Kevin and I had actually discussed that earlier, and I forgot to discuss with you. Is this also the same with number 5? We don't agree. We just note that we'll receive regular updates. What doesn't matter? Doesn't matter. Okay. Any further questions on this item? Councillor Scott.
Cool. Active transport is under the domain of the TAs. This report talks about how TAs are involved. I mean, are the TAs as committed in working towards this as we are?
Through you, Chair, I mean, through the discussions that we have at officer level, and also what I've been party to through those advisory groups, certainly. In terms of the Queenstown business case, the active transport network is quite integral to that as well. So they're very much involved. It's not necessarily the realm of the TAs, because in Queenstown it's actually Waka Kotahi who's delivering a large portion of the active transport network. The active transport network can be delivered by any approved organisation who puts up the activity and takes financial responsibility for it. However, the intention of the way that we've sort of developed the project plan here is to build in capacity at regional council to support TAs, because especially some of our TAs outside Dunedin and Queenstown, they, in their transport planning, they don't have a lot of capacity to even deliver active networks, and also it might not be part of their transport planning. It might be more to do with their economic development or their other parks and recreation type investments. And also the project plan has been developed, I think, looking forward to what we might have mentioned before is when we review our regional passenger transport plan, we're anticipating the new legislation for the Land Transport Management Amendment Bill being in place, which has a different emphasis on the way that we would do that work, so that the integrating the active with the public transport component, we would be under the new legislation, if it's passed, required to collaborate with the territorial authorities as well.
Oh, thank you.
Councillor Somerville. Then Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. The report notes that we will work with stakeholders on this, and on page 47 has a list of stakeholders identified. I guess I'd like to see public health advice included there, probably through Public Health South. I suppose my question is that reasonable?
Oh, yes, certainly.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Oh, sorry, did you have something more to add, Lorraine?
No, it's just changing yep to yes.
Thank you. Yes.
Or public health.
Just
Councillor Mitchell.
Just some clarification around the budget figure, if I can, Richard. In here, we've got a budget of 80,000 to 500,000. Just wondering what the impact is in our 23-24 budget. Perhaps Nick can tell us, he's online. Is it 80 or is it 500,000, or is the 500,000 over the life of this and goes beyond the budget period? Because it's going to, I mean, I'm happy for it to sort of just go ahead if it's been budgeted for, but I just want to know what the budget is that we're planning.
So my understanding from it is for the 23-24 year, the budget is 80,000, and there is a subsidy on that, Lorraine, correct, from what you just explained, which means the net effect on ORC's budget is just under 40, and that can be accommodated, but it's flagging that it wasn't in the existing work program that was approved. It's an additional item, but can be managed within budget. And then the ongoing costs we would need to detail and make sure we consider as part of the long-term plan, which is the life of this project, where we can have a separate line item and make sure we're very clear on what that is.
Good, thank you.
Just one question from me, Lorraine, to clarify something. Is it around support for this? Do you feel that the regional transport committees are demonstrating this sort of level of ambition?
Across the country?
Oh, across our one and the South Island ones at any rate.
Oh, across the joint Otago Southland Regional Council, yes, it's supportive and is a topic of discussion, especially because we've got one of the most extensive cycle trail networks in the country. I'm only aware of probably 3 other regional councils who are probably being as ambitious, not ambitious, just as forward-looking as this in this area, and one of those is a unitary authority. So obviously that makes it a whole lot easier because they're looking at the infrastructure and the changes in the funding all as one package. But the other council, regional council that I'm aware of is Taranaki, and I think some of the learnings from the discussions that we had is that, well, that's why we're proposing it to moving towards a BAU and a capacity building and a supportive capacity for TAs, because it does not seem to be an easy task.
Right, thank you. Councillor Malcolm.
Yeah, look, I think this is a very exciting project, and forming the strategies, yeah, look, I just think it's absolutely essential. But it does appear a wee bit that, and I'm not disagreeing with your thinking, that we're probably jumping into a space where TAs haven't been doing, and so we're going to take a lead. Do you see us as taking the lead to get regional transport in a very good space?
I do think it's a leadership role.
Yeah.
I think there's from the conversations that I've had with our TAs, there's an appetite, and it does just come down to, as I said, sometimes it's just the way that those councils are resourced across where investing in walking and cycling, and of course we've got a number of TAs that don't have any public transport. It's what they can do with what they've got, and so that's where we can step in and I guess help lead and support and collaborate.
And so sorry, Richard. Sorry.
Kevin, I think it's a good question, and I think that we do have a role in regional leadership in this space and ensuring that there is connection across the region, because the TLAs largely work independently for very good reason, and our role to ensure that we are working across those TLA boundaries to provide the best connected network we can, given that these things do have to work across boundaries as well. What we need to be very careful of when we consider this further down the track is what role we choose to play in implementation of some of these things. And I think there is some serious questions we need to ask ourselves when we get to that point. But in terms of providing our transport planning expertise as a leadership function to support those councils, make sure we have a regional picture, I think it's a good role for us to play.
Cool. Thanks, Richard. And just probably a subsequent one, and it might be more directed at the person that has walked in here and going to shape up our transport in a very good way, Dr. Byron. You said you're actually going to right size our team, which and we have had discussions about that. So I think that's really, really important. But to me, the right amount of staff is the right amount of staff to complete an activity under the right amount of pressure, and to ensure that we have productivity and ensure that we have good staff welfare, and also that we're not duplicating anything. So where are we at in that? Where we are in that realm?
So I'm just going to jump in, because I don't want us to have a conversation about staffing levels in a public meeting where we haven't had the chance to consider that as an ELT and bring it back to a long-term plan conversation. So all of the points you make are absolutely spot on. Right sizing, ensuring we have the appropriate resources to do the job that's required of us, and we think about how we do that. I'm just very conscious that that is not part of this paper, and we're still to have those conversations. So I just want to make sure we are conscious of the discussion that we're having in a public meeting.
Absolutely, and it's probably more the question around that is really, I sort of finished that question correctly. So that discussion will come once the strategy is formed. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. No, very, very excited. Thank you.
Happy to move with the amendment that 3 becomes notes rather than approves.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Do we need to change to? I'll second.
I've just got, okay, Councillor Weir seconding, and we don't need to do anything. We've just changed that. That's notes.
Briefly speak.
Yes, please. Any discussion?
Hey, look, this has been brewing for a little while, for the last 2 or 3 years, and I remember Kevin, Kate, myself, someone else, we went and had a chat with several Queenstown Lakes, Waitaki District at a governance level, and also Clinton District as well, to try and ascertain whether there's an appetite at the governance level to look for a higher level of passenger transport services, connectivity of various modes, etc. It was just very much a stargazing exercise, but I think since then this has grown legs. Obviously, governments has are focused on it at this table, which is great. But I think at this point in time, these recommendations will just take us a step further to be better informed about what that potentially might look like, because we've really got no idea at this point in time. And I think Lorraine mentioned about the sort of challenges that Taranaki and one or two others who have gone down this pathway. It's not an easy process, so this will be a bit of a fact-finding mission. And once we are better informed, we will make the appropriate next step along this way. So I'm excited about this. It's certainly a growth area, and as you go around the region and the feedback you get, you're in Queenstown and talking about transport, they talk about the number of the workforce that come from Cromwell, further afield, Alexandra on a daily basis, for example, through to Queenstown, the Wanaka traffic. You hear from the Balclutha folk, the people wanting to come up to Dunedin for appointments, etc. And you hear from Oamaru as well, a similar topic. So there's certainly, it seems to be the right time to be having this step, and hopefully we can, as I say, be better informed to make the next step, whatever that looks like. Thank you.
Great. Any other discussion? The motion, all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? No. I really do want to thank you, Dr. Bowen, and your team, Lorraine. We have given you a challenge, and you have stepped up to it, and it's awesome to see in all of the papers today to see us really, really moving along with some purpose and really thinking about this. And I just want to thank you very, very much for that work and for the support around this table for what is a contentious, difficult and expensive set of work to be involved in. But it's really important. I'll now close with karakia. Kia tau te rangi Māori, kia ronga I ngā iwi o te ao. Thank you.